Hello, this is Frida Liu, and you're watching The Shift Asia. Workforce sustainability is based on the core premise that the workforce is a primary source of value creation, innovation, and long-term business success. It prioritizes understanding what the workforce needs now to ensure that it can perform now and meet future needs to perform. So workforce sustainability encompasses various aspects, including fair wages, safe working environments, equal remuneration opportunities, as well as employees' rights and well-being. We'll talk a little bit more about this. I'm here with Nazrul Aziz, the Group Chief Strategy Officer at TalentCorp. Welcome and thanks for being with
thanks,
us.
Frida.
You know, I think one of the things that people always talk about is the Malaysian diaspora, right? You know, now what's the actual analysis of the current situation?
You know, when it comes to brain drain discussion, and then when people start to discuss TalentCorp, so we're thinking enough of this because we cannot be defensive about this.
Right.
So we need to go to the crux of the issue. Where do we stand? Whether our brain drain is really bad,
Okay.
or whether we are okay. So what we did, I think in the past 2 years was we went deeper. We look at UN migration report. So on average, the global migration report is at 3.6%.
Okay.
So this is against the world population.
Right.
So it means that 3.6% of the total world population are living out of their country of birth.
Right.
Right. So in this context, we want to know, where do Malaysia stand?
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Malaysians abroad is around 1.86 million.
Right.
So if you map that against our population, about 34 million, we stand at around 5.6%.
Okay.
So from there, we know that we are actually 2 pointers above
Okay.
average.
Okay.
It's bad. Yeah, it's something that we need to look into, but we need to go deeper. If you go deeper, out of that 1.86%, 1.13% are actually down south in Singapore.
Yes.
So 60% of our diaspora are actually in Singapore.
Yes.
And the rest, about 700,000 over, are actually sporadic across countries like Australia, UK, US, Canada, Middle Eastern countries like UAE, and we are seeing the rise of Saudi Arabia, and also in China. So means that what we are telling the stakeholders, we need to address it differently.
Okay.
Because 60% of our diaspora are actually in Singapore. And in Singapore context, if you want to address the brain drain or the outflow of the talent, we cannot apply the same approach with those who had left for the rest of the world.
Yes.
Because they are just, because the ease of mobility between Malaysia and Singapore is too easy.
Too easy.
So I always give one context where, one comparison. If you are from Selangor and you work in Singapore, technically you are just 1 hour away from your hometown, from your home.
Yeah.
So you can take flight, and you have even heard Singaporean actually fly back to Penang, and then they fly to Penang just to eat, and then after that they return on the same day. But the same thing cannot be said even with Malaysian who are living or who are from the East Malaysia.
Right.
Say it if they are from Sandakan. It'll take longer and it costs them more for them actually to even go back to their kampung if they are working in KL.
Right.
So in that context, because of the ease of mobility, so with Singapore we need to use a different approach.
Right.
Okay. And I think the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone come timely.
Right.
Because that will somehow or other naturally actually create an opportunity for us actually to retain our talent within Johor, and potentially bring back some of our good talent into the Special Economic Zone.
Okay.
And for the rest of the world, this is the reason why we are promoting brain circulation, Frida.
Okay. All right. Very interesting. What is this brain circulation?
Because of the ease of mobility now, it's very easy for people. I mean, they can stay in Malaysia, work abroad, or they can actually work abroad and still contribute back to Malaysia. And we learn a lot from the pandemic situation. So what we are promoting through brain circulation is we are promoting a platform called Malaysia at Heart. So, I mean, it is something that very close to our heart when we chose that name, because
Right.
we're thinking that every Malaysian that we meet overseas,
Right.
regardless of their opinion on the station of the country,
Yes, it's Malaysian at heart.
is Malaysia at heart.
Right. It's true.
Over their nasi lemak breakfast, teh
Yes.
tarik breakfast.
Yes.
So we started this My Heart project 2 years back. 2 years back, we started with a study. In fact, it was based on a study done earlier, Freda, in 2016 with World Bank. So World Bank at that point, they were assessing REP, because we have our returning expert program where you incentivize the returnees.
Right.
You give some tax incentive, and then you facilitate their foreign spouse with fast track PR, and you are giving some tax incentive also for vehicle, which what World Bank has recommended us is really to go beyond that. And rather than just focusing on the tax incentive, facilitate in a broader perspective their family needs, for example.
Right.
So when we started that My Heart project, we actually did a survey because we don't want to shock sendiri. I'm not a diaspora. I never live overseas. So it's not for me to say what they want. So we did a survey with diaspora to understand what they really want. So some important findings from the survey. First, 8 out of 10 told us that at some point in their life, they will return.
Okay.
For whatever reason.
Yes. Okay.
For whatever reason.
Yes.
At some point in their life, they will
Yes.
return. Second is an overwhelming 9 over 10 told us that they would like actually to contribute back to Malaysia. They
Right.
love that. But their challenge is there's no platform for them actually, because it's very hard. They are overseas, they want to contribute, but how to navigate through actually to find someone to take up that. So it's very hard because there's no platform. But an overwhelming 9 over 10 told us that they would love actually to contribute back to the nation, whether in the form of knowledge sharing, in the form of consultancy, potentially it could be joint research project,
Right.
potentially of facilitating investment.
Okay.
Okay. Then I'm thinking that this is an opportunity for us.
Right.
And then we also check on the demand side. We check the employers. So we check with the employers. Would you prefer or would you love to be connected to this talent pool, this global talent pool? And I mean, that's another overwhelming result that 9 out of 10 companies, they told us that
Yes.
yes, because of their global experience. So
Right.
they will improve the diversity of their workforce, their organization. So thinking that, and then they are thinking that it's more sustainable in a way because they are Malaysian and they will be potentially retained in the country.
Right. Interesting. Like
Yep.
when you talk about them, those that are overseas, are we sort of losing them at a certain age, and that kind of thing? Do we have a figure? Like they graduate and then they stay on. Is that where do you find that we are losing?
Okay, it depends on the country. For countries where they go and study there, country like Australia, UK, US, potentially you will lose them after they have graduated.
Yeah.
But for Singapore, it's different because potentially when you are at mid-career point, also you can also go to Singapore and work in Singapore.
Yes.
So, but the profile of returnees is around the age of 35 to 50 years old.
Okay.
So that's the profile of returnees.
Right.
So we can safely assume that the age where actually they live and they stay overseas is around 25 to 35 years old.
Okay.
Past that age, the 50 years old age, it's hard for them to return.
Yeah.
Because the attachment with the place that they are living now and the attachment back home in Malaysia is already
too wide a gap.
Yeah, too wide a gap.
Yeah.
Too wide a gap. So, and the 35-50 is actually mostly because of family reason, Freda.
Yeah.
Because for example, aging parents, they would like to be
Yes.
closer to their parents.
Yes.
So, yes. So that's the age profile of those who had left the country and those who are returning to the country.
Right. And you've shared a couple of interesting ideas. You talk about the brain circulation. And how do you ensure a robust talent ecosystem, right? I know there's some strategies where you're talking about policies, best practices, partnerships, and programs. Perhaps you can enlighten us on some of the initiatives.
Yep. On advocating policies, you know that we've been pushing for work-life practices, flexible working arrangement since, I think, 2013, 2014. And until recently, we have managed actually, in a way, influence that is now enacted.
Okay.
Enacted through Employment Act.
Right.
That now you can ask for a flexible working arrangement and your employer is required actually to respond to that.
Okay.
So that's one way of advocating policy. On best practices, again, when we are doing LAWA, Life at Work Award every
Okay,
year, so we
yes.
pick up a lot of best practices
Right.
across MNCs, GLCs, and some top SMEs. So this is the information that we then disseminate to our industry network that, look,
Okay.
I mean, these are the practices that you may consider, for
Right.
example, and then you can actually emulate it.
Right.
And in the context of internship, for example, how we advocate policies, every year we will produce a trend report to understand where do we stand with regards to our internship ecosystem. So based on our Malaysia National Structured Internship Program, where we are giving double tax incentive to the employer who hire our intern.
Ah.
Yep. So we have identified that 4 out of 10 of these interns potentially will then obtain or secure their first employment
Right.
from their internship employer.
Okay.
So this is where actually we are actually talking to Ministry of Higher Education that can we actually push the internship to be in the final semester so that the transition can
Be
happen
smoothly.
straight away. So it's a smooth
Right.
pipeline.
Yes, yes.
So that's something that we've been talking for a few years. And I think now Ministry of Higher Education, there are, I mean, of course, they have their own intel. They're also engaging with employers. They are also now considering it I think, to make it like across courses, but they are actually looking at different, looking at specific courses where they potentially have specific requirement. But generally, they will push the internship towards the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And I know, so you've got your interns, everything, but what about the working with women? I know there's also another big factor, and also with the seniors, right? What are some of the programs that you've got?
On women's side, I think this is where actually we are focusing on because it is actually a structural challenge in our country.
Okay.
Because our female labour force participation rate is lower than our regional peers. Our female labour force participation rate stand at 56%.
Okay.
And in fact, under the economic madani target, we are targeting to achieve 60% by 2030. Reason why this is a challenge because if you look at the demographic in our institution, Reda, is the opposite.
Okay.
So 6 are female undergraduates, 4 are male undergraduates.
Right.
And when it comes to the workforce, it's reverse.
Right.
So we call this internal brain drain. Because what we are doing now is to ensure that we are engaging female undergraduates earlier so that they will make an informed decision when the time comes. Of course, the reason of them leaving the workforce is family needs.
Yeah.
Family needs. And the profile is actually they will leave the workforce at the age of 27 to 35 years old.
Okay.
Actually, it's normal across the globe where female professionals at this age leaving the workforce.
Right.
But the challenge for Malaysia is when they leave the workforce, they live forever.
Right.
In other countries, they facilitate the return.
Okay.
So they will return back. So after that 35 years old, they will return.
Okay.
So in our context, this is where actually we lose them forever.
Right.
Forever in a way that we are not saying that, I mean, we are also very careful because we are not saying that when you make a decision to stay at home, for example, it is a wrong decision. What we are advocating is actually for them actually to make an informed decision and not to be forced to be in that situation.
Right.
Because nothing wrong with that because that's another contribution for nation development, nation building. But we just want female professionals not to be forced to be in a situation where they need to leave the workforce. And if they had left the workforce, what we are doing now is actually to facilitate or cushion their return. When you had left the workforce for more than 2 years, it's very, very hard for them to return. Reason why? Because technological advancement, confidence, of course, and of course, generational gap. So if you had left, then suddenly you come back and then you need to deal with different generation. You might have some difficulty to cope with that.
Right.
Yeah. Even though you have your own kids, but it's different because workforce is different. They are not your kids. So they're not your kids, right? So even though technically they are in the same age of your, I mean, like your kids, but they are not your kids, right? So you need to deal with them differently. They are your
Right.
colleagues.
Your colleagues,
Your
right?
colleagues, yeah. Yeah.
So all these are the psychological barriers and all that that we're not aware of. What about working with seniors?
Seniors, on senior side, our focus is actually on a group where actually we can have some control. We are doing a program with MINDEF
Okay.
for veterans because veterans
45, they retired.
they retire even earlier than that because
Okay.
they need to complete their 21 years mandatory service. So if
Right.
they join the service maybe at the age of 19, for example, so 21 they're just 40. So if you're talking about someone who has maybe about 15 to 20 years of productive years ahead.
Right. Of course.
So we are working with MINDEF. We call it Veteran Mywira.
Right.
So collaboratively, we pilot with Micron in Penang, Batu Kawan. So we have successfully positioned 25 veterans, 25 veterans in Micron, with a salary of, I think, if not mistaken, 2,700 and above,
Right.
up to 4,000 per month of these veterans.
Right. It's so interesting when you say veterans, it's actually 40 plus only, right?
Yeah, it's veterans, the army veterans, the army veterans. So we start this senior group with a group where we can control
Right.
first, pilot
Yes.
it,
Yes.
understand what are the problem statements.
Yeah.
So of course for army, their challenge is the adaptation to normal life.
Yes.
All this while they've been
Yes.
in the service, and then now they are living as civilian,
Right.
and then going into the workforce where you need to deal with civilian, where the dynamics of the organization is different. So it's a learning curve for us. So what we are working with MINDEF now is actually because the first group, they have actually retired.
Right.
So we need to bring them back out
I
of retirement.
see.
So what we are working with MINDEF now is actually a smooth transition.
Right.
Right after their retirement, so that 2 years prior to their retirement, we are preparing themselves straight away.
I see.
And then try to bridge them straight away to the company prior to the
Yes.
retirement.
So there's not a culture shock.
It's not, yeah. So it's something that they are prepared
It's
for.
a transition.
I mean, because you frame the mindset straight away before they retire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at all these things that you're doing, be it women or seniors, or like in this case, the MINDEF, right? Are they also, when we're looking at talent, are there particular industries that we have that there is a greater focus on, and because of that's good for the country?